Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the Kaba Ilco number 185-3-NH-single. This is a deadbolt, an 1.125" backset deadbolt for aluminum storefront. This lock is going to have extremely, just want you to hear that rattling. I'll explain it in a moment. Extremely generic footprint. This is going to fit into pretty much every scenario that you're going to encounter when you need a deadbolt for an aluminum storefront. Or, if you really had to make it work in a hollow metal door, a swinging door, you sure could. You could probably force it to work in a wood door if you were really determined. I might really shy away from trying to make that work in a wood door. It's not meant for a wood door. Aluminum doors, you can make it work in a steel door. The problem is making this fit in a wood door. And there are deadbolts available in this format for wood doors that we can help you with. You don't have enough clearance from where you'd have to prep it to get the fastener in. Now, let's take a closer look. Now, having said that, we have occasionally put this onto steel doors with a substantial amount of modification to the mounting tabs. And the reason that we've done so in the past is I've had steel doors made with very unusual style dimensions, and you can order very narrow backset mortise locks. Those are not going to be incredibly inexpensive and mass-produced like this lock. So you can force this to work onto a steel door if you wanted to. Okay, this is a garden variety deadbolt. It's a bolt. It's not a dead latch. It's not a hook bolt. It's a bolt. And what that means is the shape of the bolt is a deadbolt. It's just a piece of laminated material that is nothing other than straight, meant to lock in a swinging application. Obviously not so good in a sliding door application, or obviously not so good when there is the potential for an extreme spreading scenario. You'd really have to spread that door a lot to get that open. You would destroy the door and frame. Projection of that bolt's about 1.5 inches. I have a cylinder installed just to keep myself from having to stick my finger in here to manipulate the bolt. Kaba is going to be able to help us with dead latch material hook bolt. Dead latch are for latching doors, where you have a door that's going to have a tapered bolt on the end of it, and it dead latches rather than dead bolts or dead locks. A hook bolt is literally this with a big V cut into it, and it's the shape of a hook. You would use that. You really wouldn't use it for a sliding door because the mouth width would permit a small amount of movement, but you would sure use it to avoid the possibility of spreading the door and frame open. Spreading a frame is a common tactic used to bypass locks. You know, in the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, 1980s and 1990s, there were huge amounts of condo building that was done in Chicago, the near West Side, the West Loop area, the area around the downtown area, just on the southern border. And what they were doing were taking these epic size buildings, hundreds of thousands of square feet, that was a meat packing building in the 19th century, and they're converting it into condos. Well, the construction is just residential construction, and there were countless break-ins where someone would get into a condo building, super easy, take a 2x4 that's been cut to, say, 37 inch, stick it in there and just force it down, the frame bows out, push the door open, you take that 2x4 out, and you basically can't even tell something happened. Well, a hook bolt will certainly work to get around that sort of, to defeat that sort of bypass method. Okay, so this lock itself is an 1.1 backset. Backset is the definition of the, and I'm going to hold it upside down, is the edge of the door to the center of the hole. Okay, that dimension is 1.1. Now this, as you can see, is a bit shy on 1.1, and the reason is because the faceplate's not installed. You add that 1/8 of an inch faceplate to the measurement I just determined or shown you, and it's going to be 1.1. That's important because there's more than one size available. That's certainly for sure. Let me give you some other dimensional properties. Overall height of the lock case. About 6 13/16. Overall width, about 15/16. Overall depth of the body, not including its faceplate, about 1 inch and, what would you say, 1 5/8. Height of the bolt, about 1 3/8. Thickness of the bolt, about 9/16. Laminated construction. However, that rattling that you hear, when I first took it out of the box, I says, what in the gospel is that rattling? And I checked everywhere. Nothing was loose whatsoever. And my suspicion was that it was an anti-saw bearing. So safe manufacturers, lock manufacturers will insert ball bearings into places to significantly make more difficult the bypass method of drilling something. Well, what's going to happen is this steel that you're going to hit, and it is steel, even though it's laminated steel, which will certainly make it strong, is probably just pretty mild. So the concept is getting a Sawzall in there. Okay, it wouldn't take very long, but when you hit that hardened bearing, things are going to change. Doesn't mean you're not going to get in. It does, however, mean that things are going to be not as easy, and that's what that is. I'm not aware of anybody else who has that bearing that's in there. I don't like the idea that it will make a sound every single time, but I really don't believe it's going to make any more sound than just simply operating the lock. Okay, I don't think that's going to be a big deal. I'd like the anti-saw protection in there. Not aware of anybody else having it in a narrow style aluminum storefront door like this. There is a link below this video to the installation instructions where we can take a look at the document, which is indeed attached, and it's going to give you dimensions for prepping the door, where to place the hole. Be mindful that you have different back sets. Be very mindful of where you are installing the deadbolt body in relationship to the preparation in the frame or the inactive door. So first of all, the strike preparation for this is kind of, when I look at it, to me, it looks like a beaker. Okay? The reason is when the door gets into the closed position, you've got a wider mouth opening to fit the bolt into, and as you rotate the bolt up, it will then draw the two doors together in alignment with each other. Now, that's why the strike is prepped that way. And you'll notice that you prep it that way and it works actually very elegantly. Now, there are 3 back sets referred to here. 31/32, 1.1, and then 1.5. 1.5's not unheard of. You will bump into that every once in a while. You do need to be mindful of, if you're doing a door and frame, if you're going to prep something, customer calls you out and says, listen, I need you to put a lock on my aluminum storefront door. Got it. They have an electric strike, they have a dead latch, but when they leave at night, they want to have it bolted. Okay, great. The backset determination is going to be based on what's going to fit on the door and what's already there. So I would certainly inspect the door to make sure that I'm not going to have any sort of conflict with a cylinder. So if you go with a 31/32 backset, but then you have a 1/2 inch blade stop that's there, based on the diameter of the hole, you need to lay that out and say, do I need an 1.5-inch backset just to move the lock over far enough to account for a blade stop or a stop that's on the door and frame? So be mindful of that when you decide what you're going to do. So the backset is literally the edge of the door to the center of the hole, except that that requires a little bit of definition. Doors can be, in aluminum storefront, they can be square edge, they can be beveled edge, they can be radiused edge. Those three shapes. The backset is from the edge of the door to the center of the preparation for the cylinder. However, the edge of the door is not defined as here or here. How would you define it if it was a beveled edge door here or here? How would you define it if it was a radiused edge door? Do I measure from here or from here? Well, it turns out the right answer is that the edge of the door is actually the center of the door. Why is that important? Because that would mean that an 1.1/8 backset is dependent on where you're measuring, from the small side, which would be the push side of the door, or from the big side. You're okay if it's a square edge door. You don't care. You can get away with it. But if you've got a radiused edge door or a beveled edge door, you have to understand it's the center of the thickness to account for a beveled edge door. Now, if it's beveled, a typical bevel is 3 degree, or 1/8 in 2. 1/8 in 2. What that means is for every 2-inch, it moves 1/8 of an inch. 1 3/4 doors, going to be just less than 1/8. So be mindful, if you're measuring that backset on the big side of the door, you've got to take into account you're going to put that hole in the wrong location, as compared certainly to the other side of the door and where the lock is going to ultimately reside, because you've not taken the dimension from the proper location. The point being is there's very little tolerance in aluminum storefront work with the collars of cylinders. The hole's got to be right on. So be mindful that when you're measuring it, you do have to calculate to think from the center of the thickness of the door. 1/8 in 2 is also good, because I've seen 2 1/4-inch aluminum storefront. 1 3/4 is typical, of course, but 2 1/4 exists as well. So looking at the installation instructions, it's also important to know, okay, where do I put the preparation for the strike in relationship to where I am putting my cylinder? Okay, so they give you all the information that you actually need. You just have to study it. So from the edge of the cutout down to the center of the hole is 1.6 inch. And then they tell you that the top of the cutout for the strike is the B dimension below the center line of the cylinder. And for a regular bolt, that's 1.38. So, you know, basically 1 3/8 of an inch. So just study that before you start drilling stuff. But it's all simple and straightforward. This lock is going to take an Adams Rite MS cam. MS is an Adams Rite trademark name for maximum security. It's just known in the industry as an Adams Rite cam. Not every Adams Rite lock takes that cam, but almost all do. So that'll be a very generic situation. And interestingly enough, on the bottom right of page 1, they define what the center line is referred to as. The hook bolt dimensions are there, and they're different, so be mindful of that, of where you're going to prep the strike in relationship to the center of the lock. And at that point, there's really nothing else to go over. I see that page 2 is just simply in a different language. So we're dealing with page 1 only. Okay. Now, that covers the installation instructions, I think. Moving on to the cut sheet now, we're going to be looking at an overview of the series of lock bodies that Kaba Ilco provides. Everything on page 1 is a...
I'm not finding anything for Lafayette College.
Everything on page 1 is an overview of kind of what has been said. So I will skip through that and get to page 2. And the important part about page 2 is it shows you how to give the manufacturer a part number, which, believe me, this manufacturer needs to have a part number. A couple of screws, by the way, are included with the lock body. Okay. These screws could be used with tube spacers. If you needed to get through that hollow stile and drill and tap into the back end of the stile, you would use that long screw in order to do so. It's not really that long. And you might need a tube spacer for that. Okay, you might need to come up with mounting tabs or different screws, and we can help you with that material as well. So page 2 gets us to where we can define the part number, and Kaba does a really good job at defining how to call out the part number. So it's a 185 if you're dealing with just a deadbolt. They do make an ST version, a short throw, the same little gizmo, except the throw of that bolt's going to be significantly more petite. I do not see the 185 short throw. They don't define the projection of the short throw, but in my experience is that it's basically about 2/3 of this. And why that would be important is if you don't have the room to get it installed onto something typical. Okay, so if this is going to stick out too far for your application, be mindful they make a short throw version of it as well. So the part number can be 185 or 185 ST, and then they can do the hook bolt. They can also do the hook bolt 185 in an ANSI format. Let's see if they define that for us in the catalog. They don't. That ANSI prep is going to be a 8-inch 86 edge sort of preparation. That's going to fit into a typical hollow metal door preparation prep for an 86 edge. You know, if you're putting this onto a steel door for some reason, which you could be, for whatever reason, you want to hide all your hardware. All you want is a little cylinder outside. You don't want to see anything else. That lock could be really good as a hook bolt, and it will fit in a very petite style dimension. So you got 4 variants. That's the A section. Then you're going to move to the B section. You have to tell them what faceplate that you are using on this. In the absence of the letter, you're not going to get a faceplate. In the absence of the letter right after the 185, there's no faceplate. That would be okay if you don't need a faceplate. The only time that you, I suppose, wouldn't is maybe if you're doing some sort of installation where you're coming up with some sort of custom cover over the lock face itself. Or maybe you simply have faceplates and you don't need any with the lock. After that, you're going to get to the C area, which tells them the backset, and that has to be defined. Those 3 options are there for you to review. The handing, if it's a dead latch, yeah, you might need to rehand the lock, and you may not want to remove the cover, flip the parts over, and put it back together. If it is a dead latch, it would be handed. None of these locks are handed. They don't even have a dead latch in this installation instruction. You're going to use NH, non-handed. Actually, no, I stand totally corrected. If you have a beveled edge door, they need to know the hand, because the bevel on the faceplate is not the same. Those are handed. That's why you have to know the hand. Forgive me. So define the hand if you have a beveled edge door, certainly. Don't order an NH and then tell them a B for the bevel door. That's not going to work. Then tell them the finish. If you if you're omitting the letter for the faceplate, I would probably still tell them. You wouldn't need to tell them the hand. This is a model without a faceplate, and there's no indication of finish on there, so that would be okay. And then the IP means individually packaged. If you see IP, it just means there's one in a box, is the bottom line. Now, having said that, I think it's a good quality lock. It's mass-produced, imported from Asia, I'm sure, although I don't know that. It is, yeah, it says right on there. The anti-saw bearing is a nice feature. I did confirm that with the certified registered locksmith who runs technical support at Kaba Ilco in North Carolina. A tremendous fellow. He tolerates my several and many questions. Finally, there's a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the Kaba Ilco products that we sell, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. I'm partial to Kaba Ilco, and it's because, Well, they're a company that provides solutions that are not as readily accessible. And what I mean by that is in the link to the manufacturer's page, you'll be able to pull up the brass cylinder catalog that will allow you to review all of the hardware from Kaba Ilco. It's primarily going to be centered around cylinders and keys. So everything as it pertains to mortise cylinders or rim cylinders, profile cylinders, key and knob and lever, key and knob, lever, and deadbolt cylinders can be done. A couple of dozen keyways. Every finish under the sun can be done. They can do keying there. We can do keying here. So if you need a level 1, level 2, level 3 system of keying, that can all be handled by them or by us. There's also the link to the key blank catalog, and that's an indispensable document. And if you spend time in the locksmithing industry at all, you know, it's something that you likely refer to on a daily basis. If you have any questions on the Kaba Ilco 185-3 or any other Kaba Ilco product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.